Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I am here with a special guest today because Vic has abandoned us for sunnier climes. I believe he's in Florida by a pool. So I've brought in my friend Kelly Maher. She is executive director of Restoring Standards, a political whiz kid and mastermind out in Colorado. She is also in the snow because we got a nice big snowstorm here. So Vic can gallivant all he wants in the sun. You and I are holding it down here. We're shoveling walks.
Yep.
I'm learning to drive in the snow. Not really. I'm a wuss.
No.
But anyway, welcome to the show, Kelly.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, I just saw you last week.
Yes.
Because you were here for the opening of Congress, the kickoff.
Yes.
Of yet another dysfunctional gathering of our 535 best friends.
I mean, but less dysfunctional-ish.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. But before we get into the actual news, I do want to do a little chit-chatty about our lives. We've both survived the holidays.
Barely. Yes. We did it. We're here.
Someday I will figure out the formula for doing the appropriate amount of Christmas stuff without feeling like, this year was not that year.
Here's the problem, though. If you do the appropriate amount, then you think, oh, I can add on, right? It's always the problem with Christmas is that it's incrementalism, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, I've got the tree. Well, but the garland, and I have all of the presents, but one more. It's never core Christmas. It's Christmas incrementalism, and as a Catholic, Christmas guilt, right? Of the foregone things that always get me.
Yeah, and then if you add a tradition at any time, that's just on the pile.
Yeah, there are no elves on shelves here. I'm not creative enough for elf.
We are a strictly anti-elf family as well. We have a very strict border patrol policy.
Yes.
And they do not cross the threshold for this house.
Yeah.
And sometimes my children ask why, and I tell them it's because their father is a very dangerous creature himself, and he doesn't like surveillance within his own home.
Right.
And that it would go badly for the house.
Right, yeah. No, this year we left peanut butter cups out for Santa because it's just, why bake another batch of cookies?
I think that's totally fair.
Right? When you have so many people bringing cookies and then you bake the cookies for school, just peanut butter cups are great. Santa loves Reese's.
Santa loves Reese's.
Yeah,
I have that on very good authority. No, that's a great idea. This week, although I did get through the holidays, and then I was really, me, Kelly, I was gearing up to have a very successful January.
Yep.
In my normal sort of like fits and starts way, I'm like, I am going to be so on it in January. and so I was. So I was until day 7.
Okay.
But, I've gotten some workouts in. I've been quite disciplined about my skincare.
I can attest to the fact that you hit the first 4 days in January at the gym.
Killed it.
Yeah, yes.
I have my actual New Year's resolution. There's 2. One, because I kind of narrowed it down after I last spoke about this on the show. One, I do want to meal prep more. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, but I've been cooking more. Real food. And 2, I want to do, this is so pathetic. I, a grown woman, would like to make it my New Year's resolution to do 1 load of laundry from start to finish every single day.
That is huge. Also, I don't understand how it is that when you do a load of laundry every day, you're like kind of on top of it-ish, and then you miss 1 day.
I know.
And somehow you're 3 weeks behind.
This is what I'm trying to prevent. And some people will listen to this and say, surely that's excessive, that you don't have enough laundry to do in a day. Au contraire.
You have 4 children.
I have 4 children.
Yeah.
and my husband and I, my husband more than I do, work out a lot. So there's
Yes.
2 sets of clothes
Yep.
and 2 so then I've got the worst combination for clothes usage in the house because
Yeah.
my 2 toddlers are gonna mess up everything 3 times a day, and
Yes.
they're bedding, okay, in
Mhm.
ways we do not need to discuss, and then my my 2 older kids are tweens, so they change clothes all the time. I have
Yeah.
to have a discussion with them about, like, it needs to be 2 outfits a day. I can't
Do
or
more.
you just or you gotta put them back in your drawers. I can't be putting them in the dirty clothes. You can't do
Right.
that.
Right.
So I'm working on that.
I feel like if you graft laundry over the course of your life, you are at the apex, right? Like
I probably am.
you are at max clothing usage. And then, especially with the toddlers being toddlers and gross, right? So they
Mhm.
wreck stuff and the tween it's just you are really in the eye of the hurricane of
Yeah.
clothing for the rest of your life. I just got my planner in order to stay organized
I
because
believe in you.
I too, Mary Catherine, am hoping to really kick off the new year with a gusto. And so
Mhm.
I've got my new annual planner that will help me be productive for exactly 2 weeks, and then I will give up.
So I will believe in you for those 2 weeks.
Thank
We
you.
should the 2 of us should do a check-in in 2 weeks and be like, "Have you picked up your planner lately?"
Well, see, the thing in Colorado is
Mhm.
that January starts both legislative session
Oh.
every year, and also January is the National Western Stock Show and Rodeo, which is my favorite time of the year. And so on Thursday this week starts the parade. I will
Oh,
be
fun.
riding on a hitch. It's going to be 10 degrees, so I'll be riding on a hitch, dressed like the Carhartt Marshmallow Man, and it will be amazing in the snow where people are freezing and I'm freezing. But then by the time stock show is over,
Yeah.
I'm already my so if we could just start New Year's on February 1st, I feel like I would do better
Well,
at it.
that's kind of what I'm doing is I'm building up, like, I'm giving
Mhm.
myself a little leeway.
Yeah.
Like, maybe the meal prep plan isn't ready until the end of January, right? That's possible. Oh, and
That would be great.
I haven't even gotten to why I only lasted 7 days, which is
Mm.
that and this also is part of the laundry discussion.
Right.
There's a virus in this house.
There is.
There's a virus in this house,
Yeah.
and every 18 to 36 hours, someone else comes down with it.
It's like dominoes. It's like a
Mhm.
circle of dominoes and you prop one up and then it falls back over.
And I feel very lucky that we don't have this that often. I feel like compared to other families with young kids, we don't do this as often, but there has been ample Lysoling of every surface in this home. My husband,
Yes.
who's very good about these kind of things, has had the
Yes.
kids running around with Clorox wipes just
Yes.
all over every surface.
Up and down the banisters.
But, like, let's face it, folks, I have the toddlers on me.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get the thing. I was hoping that I was gonna avoid it. I was like, "I can do this. I'm a super mom. I definitely, despite all these direct hits, will not get
Succumb.
will not get this extremely contagious virus," which I think if you have read, the news, is probably just a norovirus that everybody is
Yeah.
getting and passing along to each other. But man, we had 2 snow days thoroughly ruined
Yeah.
because 3 of 4 kids were sick on the first snow day, and on the second snow day, mom was sick, so I just sat in my room. So here I am. That's why I'm off course. However, I did, because I wasn't sick yesterday, I shoveled my walk and my neighbor's walk, and I think that counts as a gym visit. So we're just gonna
That's awesome.
have to check.
I did that this morning. It was great.
Yeah, it's a very specific set of muscles.
It is a very specific set of
And
muscles.
aerobic, like, you're, like, very warm. By the way, I don't like to do big events in the cold, so I've never actually seen inauguration on the mall
Mhm.
because I am a wuss about cold. However, that parade and riding on a float sounds like something that I would sacrifice and do in the cold.
The National Western.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I did inauguration '04,
Mhm.
Bush Cheney '04. 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and that was enough.
Yeah. I feel like it's probably one of those things I should do,
Yeah.
but I particularly don't like dressing up in the cold.
Yeah.
That's a big ask. It's
Well,
a big ask.
and when you're going Western, right,
Yeah, you're bundled. The feet
Carhartts
yeah,
are appropriate at
that's
all
the
times.
whole vibe. The whole vibe is
Yes.
bundled up. We love it.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I mean, I've done plenty of enough inaugurations for a lifetime, but I do really enjoy the swearing in. That was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So that's where I saw Kelly last week with our friend, Jeff Crank, the
Yes.
new congressman, incoming congressman from the
Yes,
state
yes.
of Colorado. Exciting to have him. We've talked on this show before about how that was an upset win, assisted by Kelly Maher's.
So good. He's the best. I was so excited that he is now in Congress, and he's gonna be fabulous. I can't wait.
It's nice to have hope occasionally, isn't it? And while we were on the Hill, first of all, as our audience knows about me and you and I have similar personalities, I don't always put together like dates and times that well. So Kelly's like, I was like, "Oh, I'm up here for a Fox hit, do you wanna meet up?" And she's like, "I'm gonna be on the Hill for the swearing in." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll drive over there and park." Like, it's the one of the busiest days on the Hill. So lo and behold, I did park. I got rock star parking
You got
on the Hill
amazing, amazing
somewhere,
parking. Yeah.
but another problem, I did not anticipate walking around on the Hill, so I did not have a jacket, and it was, like, 17.5 degrees. But Kelly hooked me up with that, and we went in to the Capitol to watch in the office the vote for speaker,
Yeah.
which really coulda gone many, many directions, Kelly.
It could have.
But I'm pleased to report that on the first ballot, Mike Johnson became the Speaker of the House. We didn't see that coming halfway through. We were like,
No, so
"Oh, no."
we were watching and what was it, like the second or third domino fell, and we were kinda like, "Meh, this is gonna be how many votes is this gonna be?" And then
And
it
this is the perennial problem, by the way, for the Republicans in the
right,
House, which is
right.
that they have a very slim margin. There is infighting among Republicans to such an extent that, of course, McCarthy was ousted, and then you had who knows how many votes after that, or
Mhm.
how many votes to make him speaker, then how many votes for the next. It's I can't keep track. I can't keep track. And so you and I were standing there praying for one vote, not on principle,
No.
just because I'm annoyed. That was my driving force. I was like,
Well,
can we just and we did
additionally,
they did.
I
They
think
did.
it's I and not just annoyance, but what I would like to convey to the citizens of the United States of America is this idea because I know you and I both do a lot of political speeches, and oftentimes we both have kind of this magic space that we occupy, which is liberals feel comfortable talking to us about everything that they hate about Republicans because they think that we're, semi normalish. And so
Yes.
I get into this thing all the time where my liberal friends, of which I intentionally curate many because I think it's important to get out of our little bubbles, will
Mhm.
say things about how awful everything is gonna be, and they will say things about, "Oh, well, now we've got the last election of all
Of all
time,"
time.
right? And so my hope was that this was going to start to convey the idea that, like, maybe it's not that bad.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because this narrative that we've been building up for more than 20 years, right? When like I'm old enough to remember when Mitt Romney was basically Hitler and that was
Right.
going to be the end of time and now he's considered by those on the left to be, basically the m- the second best conservative, if you
Right.
will. So I just wanna convey to all of kind of the normal-ish people who largely just said, "Hey, we are sick of this garbage. We're just gonna
Right.
vote for Trump. It's not gonna be a question. This isn't gonna be some big fight. This is it. We are done. We are sick of it." Like, things are gonna be probably mostly fine.
Right.
And a single vote for speaker pretty much says, like, "Hey, we got some people who maybe have some issues, but mostly it's just gonna probably be
Right.
okay."
You're not communicating chaos. There was a somewhat dramatic scene, but a dramatic scene in that they like held the vote open for an hour and he, conferenced with people. Two holdouts, Representatives Keith Self and Ralph Norman, eventually approached the dais and switched their votes, putting Johnson over the top.
Mhm.
Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky was the only remaining Republican defector. I did see one report, I don't know, it's too good to check. I'm not even going to check it, that Nancy Mace took the two holdouts, not Massey, because he just promised to be anti the whole time.
Right.
Took the two holdouts to like a side room and had Trump on the speakerphone. He was like, basically, I'll make your lives hell if you don't just do this. Look, I think that I like Johnson. I think he's a person who sort of came into this job not even really seeking this job.
Right.
It's a crappy job. So I have sympathy for him, even when I disagree with him on certain tactics. But like, I'm not the Speaker of the House. I don't do this tough job. He showed the skills one needs to be Speaker of the House
Mhm.
in this process
Yes.
because he got the 2 votes he needed in a very slim majority, and that's what you have to do to run the House. And by the way, they have so much stuff to do.
They have so much to do.
And I just think, like, maybe a month of running around with our hair on fire about speaker votes would have been strategically not a great idea.
Well, and that's I mean, what was experienced, again, 20 years ago would have been hugely dramatic, and
Mhm.
in the landscape of today's world was basically a nothing burger, right? Like,
Yeah.
holding the votes open and having the president whip is just fine
Yeah.
at this point where we are.
Well, and I think it's much like the various charges against Trump over the years or accusations of Trump, and people just sort of like lose track of it. We're there with speaker votes, right? Like I even if there had been relative chaos, people would have forgotten in 3 weeks because
Mhm.
it's happened so many times before.
Right.
However, I think it is the better part of valor to get this done and move on with other
Yes.
business. But there
Of
is sort
which
of
there is much.
yeah, of particularly, like, I mean, they gotta do the tax stuff. The
Yeah.
tax stuff just becomes a tax hike, a huge tax hike, if it's not taken care of quickly.
Yes.
So, that's number 1. Anyway,
Yeah.
rejoice, there's a speaker. For now, the work of the House shall go on such that it is, and Crank will be there for it.
Ah, I'm excited about that. That'll be great.
What else do we wanna talk about? The vibe shift? Just today, which will be yesterday when you guys hear this, Mark Zuckerberg came out with a little video announcement for Meta that says, let's lean into free speech, basically. Like he
Fascinating.
I thought it was quite explicit about
Mhm.
the past 4 years were bad for free expression, a concession that he had worked with government in ways that were bad
Mhm.
to censor American people's takes,
Yep.
and that this is a new era and there's gonna be a lot less of that.
He also said, which I think was really interesting, he said that they are going to be restoring free expression. So
Mhm.
basically, he's acknowledging they took it, which was
Yes.
a thing he hadn't really admitted to as much before, right? He said, "We're getting back to our roots. We're going to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying policies, and restoring free expression." It's funny because it sounds a lot like another platform head
Yep.
who may, I don't know, did he like send some rockets up into space and
Yeah.
had some
Yeah, it's like
satellites or something? It's very musky,
yeah,
actually.
it is the Elon playbook. It's interesting because Zuckerberg Zuckerberg has been on a journey on this because look, I don't envy any of these guys.
No.
Content moderation is hard. I think that Zuckerberg and Twitter a little bit more willingly when it was under its old regime did too much to help the government censor Americans. That's quite clear.
Mm,
Now, some of that is because the government has the power to make their lives living hell. So it's a bit of a threat situation. With Twitter, I think they gladly did it. I think Zuckerberg seemed like slightly more hesitant about what was going on, and like
Mhm.
particularly around COVID, there were times when people were like, well, maybe it is the right thing to do to make sure that people are getting correct information. It's just that at the time we didn't know that, or many didn't know that the correct information we were getting was lies. So, so
Right.
you know, I have like a little more sympathy for these guys than some others do. Zuckerberg also gave a speech on free speech in 2019 at Georgetown because he had gotten caught up in some of this content moderation discussion before that and before the Biden administration came in. And if I may be uncynical about him, his gut seems to be in the right place when it comes to free speech. Let me read a quick, just a summary of that. In that 2019 speech, Mark Zuckerberg argued that free expression has been the driving force behind progress in American society and around the world, and that inhibiting speech, however well intentioned the reasons for doing so, often reinforces existing institutions and power structures instead of empowering people. He said, quote, some people believe giving more people a voice is driving division rather than bringing us together. More people across the spectrum believe that achieving the political outcomes they think matter is more important than every person having a voice. I think that's dangerous. That was
Right.
2019. But
Yeah.
2020, 2021 came along, the fever dream and the insanity of
Right.
that era. And, he played the game with the Biden administration.
Well, I mean, and really, I don't know if you remember, but I was at the time working for and with a one of the conservative social media networks that has since gone by the wayside.
Right.
But when you get into these kind of underpinning philosophical questions of how how to have a platform, right? And it is, okay, well, is it like a public utility? Is it a
Right.
thing that everyone should be able to say whatever they want whenever they want?
Right.
And then what is the liability associated with that?
Mhm.
It as a private company, right? Like a
Yeah.
private company, we believe in the idea that people should be able to associate with
Right.
whomever they want, and a private company should be able to determine what is or is not said on their platform because they own it. On the converse,
Right.
when you have something that is so widespread, and then you have it's not just straightforward on either side of it,
No,
right?
it's
And it's
it's not.
hard, and it's complicated, and
And
for
yet
people to
and
treat
yet
it. Mhm.
And yet, given that his heart is, I think, genuinely is in the right place on this, there's
Right.
less of an excuse then for having
Mhm.
succumbed to the Biden administration. Although, again, I have some leeway for people in the insanity of 2020. But he testified
Yeah,
before
yeah, yeah.
Congress in August saying that senior Biden administration officials pressured Facebook to censor some COVID
Yes.
19 content during the pandemic and vowed that the social media giant would push back if it faced such demands again. So, like, on one hand, credit for regretting that this happened, but, you could have been the guy who said no. He could have been the DeSantis of social media, right?
Exactly. Especially, I remember, I'm sure you do too, all of particularly, like, around the lab leak theory was where
Yes.
people really started to you just it was I think it was Jon Stewart who finally said the thing,
Yes.
like, "The emperor has no clothes," and then it was fine because Jon Stewart said it.
Yeah.
Or
They
and
got some people got big mad at him, but, like, yeah, once
Yeah,
somebody who has the cultural cred and is sort of uncancelable says the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
We
and it's just it's but it shouldn't take that,
No.
right? People should be able to it is it's hard and complicated because the thing is, like, is if when it's a private company,
Yeah.
do they have the ability to determine what's on their platform? And also, the government putting pressure on private companies is very problematic.
It is about a 5-minute video from him. You should
Mhm.
watch the whole thing. It's worth listening to.
Yeah.
But one of the bigger changes will be going to a community-based fact checking forum instead of institutional fact checking.
That
Like the
sounds so much like another big platform.
Mhm.
Hmm,
Um, so
funny.
so in the past, Zuckerberg and Meta have brought in the PolitiFacts of the world, the Pointer
Mhm.
Institute, the big newspapers to tell you what's real and what's not. But those institutions have dragged their own reputations through the mud.
Yep.
So now it looks like they're going to do a much more community notes type fact checking situation, which honestly, I didn't know how community notes would go on X, and it's been very effective.
I love them.
The wisdom of crowds has performed well
Yes.
at X. And honestly, when you make the fact checking our job, you know what that is? That's a conversation.
Yeah.
That's a conversation. It's not a decree from the
Mhm.
priests and priestesses of truth, who, by the way, just lie to you all the time.
Yes.
It's a conversation between Americans talking about what's true and what's not, which it
Yes.
turns out is healthier than
Yes.
the other way.
So much healthier.
So that's one of the things they're gonna be doing. Another thing they're gonna be doing is taking those who work on content moderation and putting them in Texas instead of the Bay Area.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, this is a thing you and I have talked about for years and years, which is there are certain segments of the population who don't talk to real people
Mm-mm.
because they don't have the need to interact with them, right? And so places like Texas, big square states north of Texas, tend to be places where you can interact with people who are different from you, and that sometimes changes your perspective.
Yes. Now, some will say, if they end up in Austin, that that's pretty cloistered as well. But, I have actually met with Zuckerberg before during some of these controversies. He had a group of conservatives out to Palo Alto to discuss when there was that huge news story that broke in like 2018 about
Mhm.
how bad the moderation was and how biased it was against conservatives. Again, it seemed like they wanted to fix it. And this is where you get suspicious, right? Like, it seemed like they wanted to fix it then. Seemed like in 2019 he was on the right track. Then 2021 come around and no, we're gonna bend to the Biden administration's will. So
Mhm.
we'll see what happens. But
And
some
now what has happened? Oh, the entire country just electorally rejected this as,
yes.
like, the oligarchy that runs the entire country. Like, weird, weird the on timing. Just
But having been part of some of those discussions, he did express, like, this place has no one who thinks different thoughts. Like, it's remarkable
Mhm.
how exactly the same everyone is. So, like, he is cognizant of that, and Austin, although it's liberal, if that's where they end up, is surrounded by red state. Like, it's a different vibe. I went to school in Georgia, and although the town of Athens is quite liberal, it can't be as liberal as the Bay Area because the rest of Georgia will be like, I'm sorry, we're Georgia. Like, you can't you're crazy.
Yeah,
The Bay Area, you get a away with a lot more of that, and there's just less cross-pollination because there are fewer conservatives anywhere near the area
yeah,
physically.
yeah.
So I do think that that's probably a move in the right direction, and again, like, I tend to be less cynical about Zuckerberg than others are, and if you go back and read that Georgetown speech, it's pretty dang good. So if we can live those values, as they say, and it is, like, culturally accepted now to live those values, right? It's not as hard, partly
Mhm.
because of the work that Elon Musk did. It's not as hard to embrace free speech and to say that it's good.
Yes, yes. And I understand that it is complicated, and I understand that it is hard and that it is nuanced. And also, the way that people are receiving information is entirely different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
And additionally, people's trust in institutions is at an all-time low.
yeah.
And so it's funny, I have a friend who was on the East Coast. He's in Jersey, and he posted something about seeing a drone. And I was
Mhm.
kind of like skeptical about the drone story. But I saw a little post and he said, I saw one. It freaked me out. And
Mhm.
then I contacted him and he gave me his firsthand account of it. And I was
Right.
like, well, thank you for giving me another thing to be scared of that I have absolutely no control over. But
Right.
it is entirely different when you are talking to somebody who's an individual with that you know and you give credibility to
Mhm.
versus reporting or not reporting, or a newspaper saying this is fake news. Absolutely not. The lab leak theory is a conspiracy theory, and da,
Right.
da, 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 and then all of a sudden you come out later and all the conspiracy theories end up being true.
Yeah. Well, as our friend, I think I mentioned it on this show, but our friend, smart friend Kristen Soul Sanderson wrote
So
in the New York
smart.
Times that
Mhm.
often when the cultural elites talk about the loss of trust in institutions, they talk about it as if it's a problem with the people who lost trust in the institutions,
Mm.
when
Mhm.
it's a problem with the institutions.
Right.
And the fact checking institutions in particular have beclowned themselves because their desires are partisan, their
Yep.
desires are ideological, and they have let those completely override their actual job, which was to try to be a ref in this situation. And it feels very clean and simple and nice, the idea of having a ref,
Mhm.
but they're not good at it. They're actually the like overtly bad at it
Right.
and are not serving truth. And I do think it's interesting. So I'll read you a couple of critiques. So Brian Stelter, who's a media reporter over at CNN, tweets, big picture. Mark Zuckerberg just announced sweeping changes to the social internet, all in line with the desires of President Trump and Trump voters. Out with the fact checkers that conservatives deride, in with more permissive rules for posting conservative opinions. Okay, first of all, that's not scary. Permissive rules for posting conservative opinions is what you guys have everywhere.
Right.
Okay? So like
Right. Yeah.
don't be scared. Everything will be okay. But it's framed as if permissiveness
Is
of
bad.
speech
Yeah.
is bad.
Right.
And Wesley Yang notes it seems a meaningful distinction that the way to pander to the Biden administration was to do a lot more policing of speech, and the way to pander to the Trump administration is to do a lot less policing of speech.
Yes.
This is the distinction to me. It is inherently not nefarious for a
Correct.
company to say the way to suck up to this guy is to do less policing of normal people's speech. That's good. That's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
But
And
the media's like, "Oh, this seems bad."
well, and by the way, like, he's saying the quiet part out loud, which is that there's not policing of lefty speech, right? There's
Yes.
not policing of progressive speech, because if permissiveness means one side, so what it means is fewer fact checkers, period, right?
Mhm.
But that means that he thinks only one side gets their situation bettered, and
Right.
that is the conservative side. Then that says there was asymmetrical policing of speech
Right.
if you are removing the policing.
Well, and to be treated like it's some sort of dastardly thing when, like, we're literally not asking to shut you guys up. We don't wanna shut you guys up. We just want both sides to talk. Like,
Yes.
that's what Elon Musk stands accused of, and look, he's not perfect at it either. These
Yeah.
guys have their own motivations, they own these companies, sometimes they get bristly about their own egos and criticism of themselves, right? So there was a moment this week that Elon Musk all of a sudden was like, "Everybody has to be nice," and that is not good for free speech either, right?
Correct. Correct.
However, these 2 guys being like, "I think, like, less censorship is
Mhm.
good. That's
Yes.
good."
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just so fascinating that when we have more free speech, all these people on the left particularly are saying, this is advantageous for the other guys. It is
Yes.
because the rule implied in that is that the rulemaking was against the conservative side.
As evidence of that, by the way, you can look back at PolitiFact. Red Steez pulls out this example. Video shows Biden wandered off from world leaders at G7 skydiving event. False on the PolitiFact truthometer. I mean, or truthometer. I don't know how they say it. They can fact check me on that. They're so full of it.
Oh,
They're
all you had to
so,
do was
so full of it.
watch the video, right?
Yeah. Well, and also PolitiFact and these other priests and priestesses of truth
Mhm.
were being paid by Meta.
Mhm.
Okay? So, like, when they squeal about this, it's not just a loss of power, it's a loss of money
Yeah,
for
yeah.
them.
Well, and that I think if you wanna talk about why people have distrust in these institutions, the "don't believe your lionized gaslighting"
Mhm.
is exactly why.
Right. Yep.
Because even my liberal friends would quietly say, after a couple glasses of wine, like, "This is not great about the Biden thing," and then they would go on TV and be like, "He's fine," but then they'd be like, "Oh, that was pretty cringeworthy. I'm a little concerned about him." And that's not good. That's not a good
No.
place to be when you're waiting for Jon Stewart to stand up and say, "The emperor has no clothes,"
Yeah.
right? And
How
there's
many
only a few
more
people who can do that.
I know. I this is my thing too about I also have a theory about Mark Zuckerberg having taken
Mhm.
up MMA. So
Mm,
he does Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and there is an MMA to based pipeline. Like,
mhm.
you don't do MMA training for any amount of time and come out the other side liberal still. Like, I just if you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it's just like a year or 2 before you're one of us. So I think that is part of his arc as well.
That tracks.
But yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes. And I think it's largely good to have the PolitiFacts of the world. And I'm not just picking on them. There's a lot of groups that were
Yeah.
part of this and were bad at it to have them not have that power. Because all those groups knew they were working with the federal government to censor Americans. And
Yeah.
Zuckerberg did too. This is the thing, like a lot of content moderation is tricky and
It
the lines
is.
are blurred. However, you know what's not a blurry line? When the federal government asks you to censor people. 'Cause you
Exactly.
know that one's in the First Amendment, right? Like,
Exactly.
you're allowed to censor people. You have to decide what your ethos is.
Yep.
However, once the disinformation board or whoever somewhere Nina Jankowicz is crying, regrouping to come after us again. The disinformation board or the Biden administration, whoever it is over the White House, tells you to shut up Americans, you should say no.
Yes,
You should
exactly.
say no.
Exactly, and that is I agree with you. It's not super straightforward all the time,
Right.
as some people will say, right? Like, when you just open everything up, that's where you get really scary, kind of, like, illegal, creepy, bad stuff happening,
Yeah.
and how do you discern, right? Like,
Right.
I know it when I see it. Discernment is a really, really hard thing when you are talking about the volume of information, but
Yes.
erring on the side of speech should always be the norm.
Right. I do
So,
I do think the style of fact checking really does it has been not chaotic on X. It has been helpful. It has been sober most of the time. There are some jokey ones that are good, but they're like very clearly jokey ones. So I have some hopes for this. We'll see what
yeah,
happens. Shall we talk briefly about the Golden Globes being part of the vibe shift as well?
I love the vibe shift.
The
Yeah.
vibe shift is great.
Yep.
So Nikki Glazer was the MC, the host for the night at the Golden Globes, the drunker version of the Oscars. And I like Nikki Glazer. She's sort of a little risque lady comedian. She used to appear on a show called On Midnight. I've seen her on podcasts. I've seen her stand up. I don't it's not she's not my favorite, but she's good and a little dirty. Her it's really those rooms are hard. I do not envy people having to do award shows because everyone there is very powerful and very pompous. And so doing comedy there can be tricky. I thought she did a very nice job, but the reason and I think you have her political joke, which we do wanna tell.
Mhm.
However, most of the night was just not that. Like
Right.
even the big acceptance speeches were
Yeah.
not resistance speeches.
Right.
And Glazer's monologue was just funny. It was
Yeah.
just funny. And
Yeah.
it was so refreshing because people don't do that anymore.
Well, and that it kind of was like a callback to before everything was a thing,
Mhm.
right? Which I think is the name of a chapter of a book called
End of
End
discussion.
of Discussion. Everything is a thing.
Yeah.
And over the course of the years, we've been watching this decline into everything needing to be a platform to make
Yes.
some kind of plant your flag, make some kind of stand, hashtag resist, hashtag what. And sometimes a couple of Ozempic jokes and, a little bit of self-deprecating Hollywood humor
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah,
Not
there were a few like egos punctured. There were a
Yeah,
few hypocrisies made fun of.
yeah.
It was all good. What was the political joke she had?
Oh,
She had
okay.
one brief
So
one.
she said in her opening monologue, "I'm not here to roast you tonight. I want you to know that. How could I really? You're all so famous, so talented, so powerful. I mean, you can really do anything. I mean, except tell the country who to vote for."
It's
Like,
true.
correct.
I mean, the American people put them in their place, and then Nikki
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
piled
And
on, and I
like
appreciate it.
let's didn't go over the top, but like pushed the bruise a little bit and was like,
Yeah.
let's all check ourselves. And that,
Yeah.
frankly, is a great tone check. Not everything has to be a thing. We got a speaker in one vote. Maybe everything will be fine. Let's just all kind of take a deep breath and mutually disarm and be fine.
Do you know what did not pass the vibe check?
What?
Okay, so like parts of Hollywood are getting the memo, and I think comedians are sort of ahead of the curve on it.
Yeah.
So the category for best comedy or musical, this movie called Amelia Perez won.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
won over Wicked, which I have not yet seen, but has gotten just like rave reviews. And by the way, is not some like conservative tale. Wicked itself is like a
Right.
progressive
Right.
telling with progressive themes that progressives are very excited about, right? But you know what? Also, normies like it. It's a great combo. But I guess that's not enough to win Golden Globes. What you need to win Golden Globes is this. Emilia Perez from the Wikipedia entry is a 2024 French musical crime comedy film written and directed by Jacques Audiard. The film is about a Mexican cartel leader who enlists a lawyer, Zoe Saldana, to help her disappear and achieve her dream of transitioning into a woman. Its original songs were written by Camille, who, while its original score was provided. Kelly? Kelly, are you hearing me?
Oh, I'm hearing you
It's a musical
about
about a male cartel leader transitioning to be a woman and having his lawyer navigate the legal system to do that.
I
A musical, Kelly. How can this
I
be real? How can it be real?
I don't know, but now I really wanna see it because you know how it's like the kind of thing that you can't imagine what it would be from that
Oh,
description?
I can help you with that a little bit. Let me play some of this one musical number.
Oh, no. And, I mean, I was a theater nerd kid, right? Like, I know every word to Rent and actually Wicked, and I don't
Okay.
everything
I'm
is a thing.
I'm gonna play some of this. I feel like first of all, it's an injustice that this won over Wicked, and I haven't even seen Wicked yet. But it's also a fantastic time capsule of
Mhm.
this period of insanity and the
Okay.
fact that Hollywood has not yet gotten the memo entirely on it.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
let's just see if you can hear some of this.
Okay.
From penis to vagina. Is it for you?
For me,
What would you like to know about it, madam?
I want to know it all. What is the protocol, the techniques and the risks? How many
bottoms up for reduction.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes.
It's a song about vaginoplasty.
I mean,
that is like something that should win the Razzies, right? That's the award show for the worst movies.
well,
But I think that it will serve as a reminder of this time in Western society and perhaps a warning for us not to go back there.
yeah,
Vaginoplasty.
I mean, look, some of my favorite musicals include musicals making fun of basically the entire Mormon church and also really, really dirty Muppets, right? So we've got like and then we have there. I'm
There's
all
room
about
for all sorts of
yeah,
things. Yes.
I'm all about like bleeding edge of taking on modern society. But wow, I just wonder, do you sometimes wonder if aliens see just one thing? And then you look at that one thing and then you think, I wonder what they think about society, whatever it is, right?
Let's hope
TikTok or
it's Wicked instead. Because that is, and I think this is also part of the problem with the woke era of art
Mhm,
is that everything has to be so literal. It
mhm.
has to be plastered all over with like, we are the good people. So we made a musical about a trans cartel member, and it's entirely voiced and acted by people of color, just so like, and every song is explicitly about how wonderful transitioning is like there's no nuance. It's just signaling from top to bottom. I think I am gonna have to watch it though, because it seems like
Yeah, I now
im-
I now need to see this thing just if nothing else to understand this entire if it's an encapsulation of this entire time,
I think we gotta hate watch it.
here for it. Here for it.
I will also see Wicked. Anyway, that one blew my mind, and I just think that means that we will see a transition of sorts to more normie entertainment, but there will be plenty who have not gotten the message and are doing 2020 content.
Yeah, hopefully it'll start to change and we can just be funny and lighthearted and everything will just be okay-ish.
Okay. Well, we have a
Okay.
speaker. So step
Okay,
one.
adjacent. We have a speaker. We have a speaker. We have the ability to now crowdsource Facebook and meta content moderation. And we have a relatively not offensive Golden Globe, pretty funny situation. I'll take it.
Maybe nature is healing. All right, I'm going to close this out. Thank you
Yes.
for listening to Getting Hammered. Thanks, Kelly Maher, for being here. You can find her at OKMaher, Maher, on X or restoringstandards.com for her organization. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly, everyone. This has been a Nebulous Media podcast.